We're live.
All right. Welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It's Thursday, April 23rd. We are here to talk about and get an update on the FMO dashboard and talk a little bit about some of those important projects that ADS and the Enterprise Project Management Office are tracking. And we'll just go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves and then turn it over to you for the record. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell, St. John's Ferry.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham,
Michael Southwood, Helen.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Territory, Washington 2.
Graham Pluckner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Spillia, Wyndham 10.
All right. And joining us, Rick Feltus.
Marty Feltus from Appropriations. Imagery. Lisa Goggin, JFO IT Consultant.
Justin Johnson, MMA.
Right.
John Kelly, yes.
Stacy Gibson Granfield, Chief Program Officer from the Agency of Digital Services.
All right.
So, good morning. My name is, as I said, Stacy Gibson Granfield. I'm the Chief Program Officer from the Agency of Digital Services. My oversight responsibilities include the Project Management Office under ADS. And I'm here today to give you an update on the dashboard and then answer any questions or get into some project updates as the committee wishes. So I'm not sure, Representative James, do you want me to just kind of go over the dashboard itself?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. I don't know if we want to project it or.
Yeah, let's pull it up.
If you can, that'd be great. Yeah.
So last year we were here and we worked together on some changes that you wanted to see in the dashboard. We added a couple of additional columns of data, and we've been filling those fields since last year, mainly to include the difference between an early project start date, which is when our project management office resources typically become aware of a project, to an actual implementation start date, which is when we actually have a vendor under contract working with the team. And we consider that implementation start date to be a kickoff date, if you will. That's when the whole team assembles for the first time and really starts the project work. We added additionally an additional date for estimated completion based on once implementation starts, does the completion date change based on those initial estimates? So for each column, whether it be the date or the cost, the early one is at the time that the project becomes a known thing, where people are talking about an idea or trying to determine if they're going to go forward with something, versus when we actually start the project with a vendor, with a project team, which includes business staff, ADS staff, developers, that type of thing. So you have an early start, an estimated implementation start date, an early end date, and then an estimated completion date. And then you have the early cost and an estimated cost. The second column of each of those categories will change as the project rebaselines. So we may start off a project, let's say we started on January 2026. That becomes your implementation start date. The vendor's on board, we're working through the project. Through the life cycle of the project, we may go through change control procedures that would then inform a change in the schedule, right? So, for example, we may decide that, you know what, we started, but something happened, a pandemic, a flood, that kind of paused the actual start of the project. We might go through a change control process that restarts the start date. So you might see that change. You'll more likely see that change on the estimated completion dates versus the start date, because usually we start on time, but those completion date estimates may extend beyond what you originally thought was going to be your completion date because of those change control procedures. Same thing with cost. We may start off with a project budget of a certain amount, right? And our early estimates are typically like, what do we think this is going to cost based on what we see in the industry, based on what we think we're going to need for time, based on what we think we're going to need for resources. Once you have a contract executed with a vendor, your costs are more realistic, right? You now know I have a term because the term's in the contract. and I have an implementation cost based on what that vendor is going to charge the state, those become real numbers. And based on those two factors, we can then estimate better staff costs, right? So like if I know the term of a project is 3 years, I can start to estimate out how much time in staff resources we're going to need based on those terms. And so we'll factor all of that into the cost. However, through the life cycle of a project, things can happen, right? Schedules may get extended. Vendor costs may increase, scope might change because, you know, our business partners that they need something that they didn't think they needed originally, and now they do. Those will cause increases. You can also see decreases where we decided we didn't need a particular scope, or we came in sooner than expected, which obviously is going to decrease your overall costs because you don't need resources attached as long as you thought you did. So you'll see some fluctuation in those second columns of cost and completion date, primarily based on change control. And then we have the budget percent complete, which kind of indicates out of the overall budget for the project, we have expended X percent. And that will obviously change as we move forward. So you may not see a high percentage early on in the project, but then later on in the project, you should start seeing those percentages go up. So without really seeing the dashboard, I think that covers the changes we talked about last year to try to give you a sense of what we did to make changes to try to inform changes over time in the projects. The other thing that we did change is below the inventory, we changed the definitions of the status indicators. So where you see like the yellow exclamation point, the green check mark, the red X, we changed how we were defining those. If you remember previously, it was pretty verbose and it kind of covered a bunch of categories, some of which aren't even on the dashboard, like quality. So we decided, let's simplify it to help Vermonters, really citizens who have an interest in these projects, to better understand what we're talking about. So we simplified the language just to make it easier to follow along.
That's on the page where it just says green, yellow, red,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Boop, boop, boop.
Yep. Any questions? Thank you.
I get that was feature by a little bit, Chris. So I find the pop-ups with the little explanations really, really useful. Although it would be nice if they were a little bit more descriptive over on the check marks and exclamation points and all of that. But it would also be useful to have, you know, I don't know how easy it would be. On the other fields, I see the project start date field has a pop-up. I don't know if they fit with it. I would even be to add them for some of these other ones. And then I also don't remember whether it's possible to drill down into a project if you want to learn more about a project.
So currently, we are limited in what we can do with the dashboard. We can't add any more pop-ups. There's not enough room on the dashboard, so that isn't something that we can do today. And the drill down capability is another feature that we don't have the tools to allow for that today, so we're not able to provide that functionality.
All right.
Yeah, understood. I hear you. Yep.
I remember we did talk about that last year, that we made a similar query, like, oh, can it just link to? And I remember you saying that this platform just doesn't have that capability
Currently, correct.
Yeah, Rob Morrow.
I'm just curious about the missing data for some of these projects. I mean, we have one that is looking at DHS TCF phase 2, which is an estimated completion of less than a year from now, but there's no
The
data.
CDDIS one.
Correct.
Yeah, so that one is actually in procurement currently. That completion date will adjust once they have finished their contracting process. So
It's safe to assume that any of them that don't have data
yes, mostly, I would say there are,
procurement.
yes, I would say mostly they're in a pre-procurement process, or we haven't even started the pre-procurement process yet. We may still be in ideation, but we have PMO resources assigned to facilitate those processes. So that's why you actually see it on the dashboard.
But yeah,
So where does this estimated completion date come from? I haven't even.
well, those initial ITABC forms, they'll put in completion dates. Some are informed by whatever might be driving the project. So for example, there may be a compliance requirement that says this project must be completed by the state. Oftentimes when you see that, it's because there's a funding associated with it that says, you know, you have to spend this money by this date. So they'll use that as the estimated completion date. There are occasions where, because the process and the system that we use is extremely manual, that staff put dates in the wrong fields. They have multiple fields where they have to enter the same information in, because they have to use a different field for the dashboard versus what we use for like the annual report versus what they use for status reporting. So they're in there putting these dates in multiple fields, and, you know, human error obviously does happen. We do have a process in place where the portfolio managers do regular reviews of the data to make sure that we're catching those. But again, relying on humans with capacity and workload challenges, things do tend to slip through from time to time.
But someone's putting in, the green,
Mhm.
yellow, red in these projects that haven't even entered procurement yet. So,
That's a default of the system that we use. So
Oh.
the system automatically does that based on the data that's entered into it. It has an algorithm that runs in it. And so when we run the query that informs the dashboard, it picks up those algorithms.
okay, thank you.
I had a sort of a follow-on question, which was to remind myself of how how you keep this updated and how often you're able to do that. I felt like you were doing it weekly or
Yeah.
more. And is it automated?
No.
I didn't think so. You're
Yeah.
going out and getting the information from each project and entering it by hand into the back end.
Every project manager goes in usually Friday. There are a couple of projects that prefer like a Wednesday timeline, and that's because they're updating the feds as well. So they try to meet those timelines. But for the most part, every project, they go in Fridays. Friday is data update day. They spend the majority of Friday in the tool entering all the data. They enter the status report information in there. They enter all the resource, the allocation updates, and all the cost updates. And then, so that's done. It has to be done by Friday at 6 p.m. And then usually Monday morning, we have a member of the data team that runs the query manually from his computer, which ties up his system anywhere from 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending on stuff, technical stuff like network stability or just the amount of data being imported with the query. And that's what updates the dashboard. So that's done usually Monday morning.
Okay, so you've got all the individual project managers putting everything in there.
Mhm.
And then on Monday, you run the query and it populates.
It populates the dashboard. Yeah.
Okay. I had a Rep Sebelia.
Do you produce some sort of change report after that on Fridays or Mondays?
A change report.
Like
for-
what's the change status report?
No, so each project manager produces a project status report that typically goes to the project team, including the business leadership. So that can be a mix of something that's exported out of the tool, or some of them, because the tool has limitations in accessibility requirements and the visual, I want to say, making it look really sharp and professional. The tool itself doesn't have that capability. So what the PMs will do is they'll copy stuff out of the tool into a PowerPoint deck or a Word document to use as a project status report. But those get generated Fridays after they've done all their data entry.
So there's no comprehensive kind of oversight of all of the IT projects. That's like a report about here's the status that has changed this week when we're uploading data.
No, not today. There is not. No, that is a manual process. So a portfolio manager, if they want to know about that, they would have to manually go in and look at all the projects in their portfolio and then write a report to do that. there isn't a report that generates from the tool that would give us that information.
And so how are the changed statuses? How is that reported up to leadership of the agency?
So when a project changes,
I mean, overall, or is it really just case by case?
it's
We're looking-
case by
So
case.
no one is looking at the overall
Not at a
IT.
holistic, no. No, so PMs will show on their status reports, last week we were green, this week we're yellow, and they'll do that each week. That is manual based on what they know about the project. There is no systematic way to generate a report at an enterprise or portfolio level that would tell me that. I would have to rely on the PM to tell me that.
So how is the secretary kept apprised of the kind of overall workflow or overall progress?
So
of
she gets a lot of emails, a lot of status reports, and then every week I provide basically a weekly report to the CIO. Usually that's not on every project, but it is the ones that are either in a red or yellow status that are, having challenges or a high priority for the state. She will get a weekly update on this from me. And again, I get that from the PMs. So they, in addition to what they do in the tool and the status reporting, they have to provide a weekly update to me every week that goes to the CIO.
Do you post that report anywhere?
No, it's a confidential report.
Why is it confidential?
Just because, I don't know, it has been since I joined ADS.
Is there confidential material in there?
Sometimes
Can you
it
give
can
me an
be-
example? I'm not an IT.
Yeah,
professional.
so some of the confidential information could be related to contract negotiations that you didn't necessarily want posted publicly, right? Or procurement related things. Rarely are there security related things, but there could be. Like we have a couple of projects that are, related to modernizing or improving our network. There's some really technical details you wouldn't want to post publicly, right? But typically it's that type of thing. And some of it just might be challenges that we're having working through problems that we want her to be aware of, that we're working on them and we're mitigating them. Not necessarily for her to do anything, but sometimes it's because we need her to reach out to members of the cabinet to assist, depending on what we're dealing with.
So for members of the public, members of the legislature, taxpayers, this is where the
Annual report's another source of information, which I know is a point in time, but that is another source that can kind of give you an idea of how projects are trending on an annual basis, the dashboard. And then I think the project status reports themselves are considered public information. So if people wanted to ask for that information, they could probably get what they need from the PM or from myself. We don't typically give direct contact information out for the project managers just to kind of protect their privacy and keep them out of the public limelight. So if there was things that you wanted to know about, you could reach out to me and we could provide you with details that you might not be able to get from the dashboard.
I think that's it for now.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, when we were taking all of our testimony and had to write our budget letter, excuse me, about the changes in the ADS funding structure. You had mentioned kind of a related concern about your ability to kind of see all the IT projects or easily get the information you need. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Or, I don't know, are you feeling more reassured, or how do you think that's going to work?
Yeah, I'm not feeling reassured. So I'm not saying that I am not going to have the visibility and transparency I need to be able to report out costs in a timely fashion. So there's now going to have to be a process by which I retrieve data from the other agencies to inform actuals. I don't have a vision or HR system that allows me direct access to that data. And on the business side, it's going to be a challenge for them as well, because they don't necessarily charge their costs in the same way that we would. So there's going to need to be some process and and collaboration to make this work. I am expecting that we could be 1 to 3 months behind in our ability to report actuals.
I don't know if this is related, but in our testimony about the ERP project, the budget module is done. Is that not the same?
That is not the same.
Different? Yeah.
I have a specific project question.
Yeah, are we gonna
Go
talk,
that.
yeah, sorry, specific projects. Okay.
Well, one was the unemployment insurance, which
Mhm.
Lisa complimented you guys on yesterday in testimony. It seems like it's going well.
Yep.
So, you have a couple of yellows on here on that one. Is that just because of the algorithm you were just talking about?
It's the algorithm automatically calculates that. It can depend on how the PM is entered a code. They have to put a number code in there, and that is how the system interprets it.
But you're happy with where that is?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Congratulations. It's a big one.
Yeah.
There's another big one on here, which I hadn't been aware of, for $63 million Medicaid data warehouse and
Mhm.
analytic solutions, which also looks like it's doing well. But can you just give us a
Yeah.
quick overview of what that is?
Yeah. So it is a big data warehouse project that it is in the Agency of Human Services Department of Vermont Health Access. The intent of it is to be able to give a 360-degree view of costs associated with Medicaid recipients. So claims and clinical data is ingested into this data warehouse. And so it pulls data from multiple systems into one data warehouse. And then it also has a data reporting and analytics tool attached to it to allow the department to more easily pull reports and report out on like Medicaid spend. So I think it covers enrollment as well as expenditure data, like anything you wanted to know about Medicaid recipients. For the most part, especially from a cost perspective, you should be able to get from that system. It's extremely successful. It was pretty much green right from the beginning. We had a great vendor partner. They are essentially complete. They're transitioning into operations now. I don't know the exact date that that's supposed to be complete, but that's kind of where they're at.
Did that get changed because of federal changes in Medicaid rules?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not
No,
that you decided.
no,
Okay.
no.
My last question was about BT buys, because my information on that has come from the press and I'm
Mhm.
not sure how accurate all that is. Can you,
Yeah,
I mean, obviously there was some rollout
yeah.
issues, so I just want to get like the real deal on what
Yeah.
happened there.
So VT Buys is complete. Project officially ended January 31st of 2026. They are now in production and they are in operation. They are making some enhancements to the system currently, but essentially the original DDI phases are complete. This project I would describe has been the perfect storm. It started about the same time this agency was created, maybe a little before ADS was. So folding it into the PMO processes and procedures was a little, took a little bit to happen before, they kind of started down the path before we got involved. So
PMO is project
Project
management.
Management Office.
And what
Yep.
was DDI? Sorry.
I'm sorry, design, development, and implementation. So that is what we call the implementation phase of the system is what we call DDI. So it hit 3 significant roadblocks. One was the pandemic. And because of the impacts of the pandemic to the state workforce, we had to implement what we call force majeure on the contract. So everything halted, right? And that was because our business partner, Buildings and General Services, needed to focus on responding to the pandemic. We were all kind of in the throes of that, our agency as well. We didn't get our state workforce remote. We had to make sure that services continued to get implemented. So the collective decision was everything needed to pause, including the vendor. So we didn't come back. I think it was a 1.5 years, maybe 2 year delay in the project because of the pandemic. And then it took a significant amount of time to get the team back together. So the vendor in that interim had reassigned their resources. So we weren't necessarily able to get the same developers back on the project when we restarted. And then in 2023, we had the flood. That again slowed things down significantly. And again in 2024, because as you know, BGS is on the front lines of responding to these events, and the Office of Purchasing and Contracting also is very busy in those instances. And they had a very lean team. I think they were like 2 people for the whole state at the time. So those things really caused some disruption to the project schedule. We took an iterative delivery approach, which is as we moved along, once we were able to get back together in 2025 is when we really started to make some headway and get some velocity behind the system. We took an iterative approach that allowed us to develop, test, and deploy the code. And then we spent time from July through January refining it to make it better. So July 21st was the date that we officially went into production with VT-Buys. And then since then, the team has been working on making improvements because there were some issues, technical issues, functionality issues with the system, and the team is still working through some of those today. But they did manage to go live with a system in production. I would say it's mostly complete. There are a few things that we need to finish, mostly in the contracting side of the house. I believe the supplier management module is live and working. I believe the sourcing module, which is solicitations, bids, RFPs, that type of thing, that is also live. There's some work that needs to be done in contracting. There's some work ongoing right now in the purchasing module. So you can do your purchasing, but it's more around the POs rolling over into the next fiscal year. That's the work that's underway currently. And the expectation right now is that they will be live with that functionality prior to the close of the fiscal year. That's the goalpost that they're working on. Everything else is in operations. They're prioritizing what they want to do next with the vendor. And, that's kind of no longer in my view. I would have to reach out to them on anything else that they've got planned, but essentially that's VT-Buys.
Question.
Yeah, Rep. Sebelia and then Campbell.
And why? Because that is still ongoing. Is that not on the project?
The project is closed.
But there's modules that are still coming
There's
online.
production work happening. So we don't carry projects on the dashboard that are in production. Once they're in production and our services have ended, it comes off the dashboard because I don't have visibility into how things are going in operations. That is something that they manage within the IT operations and business operations teams.
Okay.
I just wanted to quickly ask Chris has a comment, I think. Sorry, so in production means that
The project management office engagement has ended. No
Okay.
longer an IT project. It is now
it's a thing,
now a
a
system.
thing, a happening thing.
Right, like DMV came off the dashboard when it was completed, right? The data warehouse will come off the dashboard in a few months once they're fully into production.
Okay.
So
Lisa, did you have?
Yes, on this particular project, there's a project, I think it's a PO, a purchase order module that they're planning on bringing online over the next year.
that's what I was just talking about. They are currently working on what they call the PO rollover process, which is where when we close the fiscal year books, purchase orders that are open have to roll over into the next fiscal year. And then other POs need to close at the end of the current fiscal year, right? So they are working on that process currently. That is supposed to be done by the end of June this year. As far as I know, there isn't any other PO module being
Okay.
worked on.
I'm gonna go to the person who mentioned that to me and I might follow up with you if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. You
Okay,
can also
great.
reach out to BGS directly. If
Yeah.
it's in production, they're
Got it.
prioritizing those things.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Rep. Campbell?
Yeah, I'm wondering, with all these projects, to what extent it's possible to standardize something, sort of design or, I know that they're trying to standardize the sort of the pure procurement process, but thinking sort of long term, wouldn't it be great if these systems could talk to each other, if there was, I don't know, standard data design or something so that there were, so that we're not running into the problems that we have now, updating these 20 or 30-year-old systems that have different data parameters, or different, you know.
Yeah, so,
You understand what
yeah,
I
I do. Yeah, I think I do. So we do have a process or a procedure in our projects where we look at integrations and where systems need to connect and communicate with each other. So I'll use the data warehouse project as an example, right? That system has to integrate with other systems to keep them updated and in sync, to make sure that, one, the data warehouse has the current accurate data, but that these other systems are also, you know, staying in sync with them. So they have an integration to what we call the Medicaid Management Information System, which is a separate system maintained by a vendor. That system is the one that houses all of our enrollment data for Medicaid recipients. So that is like Blue Cross Blue Shield for the state, right? So the data warehouse integrates with that so that when somebody gets enrolled in Medicaid and then a claim gets issued against that enrollment record, the data warehouse is aware of it and can capture that data. It integrates with the Access mainframe, which is a legacy system today, which also has some Medicaid data and eligibility and enrollment data in it. And when integrated eligibility and enrollment starts, there will be an integration between the data warehouse and that. So we do things like inventories of integrations and other systems that we need to work with. We also look at what of those other systems can be decommissioned as a result of this new system, which can also happen, right? So that just depends. Like with DMV Core, for example, when that went live, the legacy DMV system should go offline. You don't need two systems, right? So like those are things that do happen as a standard practice in the design and development of IT projects. And that's where the Chief Technology Officer's team comes in, as well as my team of enterprise architects.
Yeah, so I guess that's interesting, but I guess I'm also thinking in terms of, so the Medicaid data warehouse system does, when somebody comes off of Medicaid because now they're earning too much money to qualify, are those records then portable to sort of standard insurance in a Blue Cross Blue Shield database?
Yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about a multi-ecosystem of different, yeah, and they are supposed to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and DMV and medical systems, and I don't know whether these are so for example, name and address and state, all those kinds of data fields that are common across all systems.
So what
standardized?
So one of the
Can I just speak? I'm very sorry. Secretary Riley Hughes?
I'm sorry, your voices.
Projects and systems. I want to separate the conversation from what you're talking about. Data.
Yeah.
There is the consistency of data that you're describing doesn't carry through between systems because each department and agency.
certain agencies.
Yeah.
Check conversations. Data conversation. Easy doesn't have.
Oh, I'm thinking in terms of, yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of design.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
to what extent can design be,
Yeah.
across systems?
Based on what their compliance requirements are.
Yeah.
Data governance and data requirements so that all that retention and the content and security sensitivity that stays with the business process.
Oh, yeah.
Agency.
Right.
based on their requirements.
Right, and I'm not talking about the data itself, I'm just talking about the design, because Lisa's.
To clarify, I think of what Denise is saying is, sometimes just because you could bring them together, doesn't mean you should, because there are all sorts of, requirements
Yeah.
and things, so sometimes, that have to be addressed and navigated.
Yeah, no, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not even asking about connecting databases, I'm just asking about standardizing whatever we can standardize. I'm asking about that, to what extent that's possible and to what extent
So
we're getting there.
we're always looking at opportunities to
Yeah.
standardize.
Yeah.
I think where the project office comes in on this is in requirements gathering, right? So understanding what the business needs, understanding what their intended outcomes are, and then ensuring that is part of the project's design.
Yeah.
But the work around what that is, the information that is, that comes from the business.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So we do facilitate that, and
Yeah.
so that is used, but that would be the standardization that we provide.
Right, well, it's the,
Is that-
as the sort of data manager or whatever, IT manager for the state, that's what we're getting towards, anyway. All right, thank you.
Rep Morrow?
Not my office. I'm on the IT managers,
Oh.
and I'm sure they're thankful for that.
Rep Morrow and Kleppner?
Clarifying question on that. I mean, any of these systems are capable of generating and receiving APIs, right? In the
Yes.
modern systems, right? So I mean, we started talking about that on Tuesday a little bit. So that's how you're connecting systems if you need to, right? Like the old legacy systems, you can't do that, right? You're pulling in a purchase order and none of the fields match up.
Yeah.
And
Yes. And yes, I mean, APIs are the method to do that. That's what we call integration, is through the API.
right, and pretty much all these modern systems that were integrated
Yeah, I mean,
across state government.
especially those that are like cloud-based
Right.
solutions. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, what's an API? Sorry, guys, the
Not-
acronyms are.
I'm not really sure what it stands for. It's something.
Application programming interface.
Thank you.
What does that mean?
It means it's a little bit of code that allows two different systems to talk to each other and to
Yeah.
understand each other's data.
This is why IT managers don't want to work for me, because I couldn't have done that.
Well, it was what Greg Campbell, I think, was getting at was this is the mechanism where all the modern systems can talk to each other with a little bit of code. Whereas all the legacy systems
They
couldn't
can't.
do that.
Yes,
Okay.
Right, and
yes.
to the extent that data is standardized across different systems, it makes the API supportive.
Correct.
And when you say standardized, you mean using the same fields, for example?
Same field names, same
Same-
field
okay.
lengths or whatever, you know. the
Yeah.
first
Just
name,
for the
last-
rest
you
of
know,
us.
Whatever, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So Rep Clipner and then Bailey?
Some of us have spent a lot of time dealing with data that has first name, last name in one field versus first name, then last name versus last name, then first name.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Street number, street.
It's a hassle. But on the subject of integration, we hear regularly about processes that involve manual input of data. And I wonder if it wouldn't be wise or helpful or money saving to have a project that sort of looks systematically across government, all the manual processes, and sees which ones can be automated.
Hey, I would welcome that, but again, I don't have the funding to do that. That is a project in and of itself, right?
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
it's a project and a big one, and it's analogous to the problem we run up all the time with weatherization, right? The upfront cost, there's savings, there's a lot of operating savings in the back end, but you got to have the cash to begin with to hire someone to do it.
Yeah, so absolutely. That would be a great project to put forward in our new intake process. So, and I don't know how much you guys have heard about this to date, but we recently, in the last 6 months, adopted a new intake process that replaces the ITABC form process. And essentially what that is, let's say your representative came in with this project idea. I would like to, do a project that looks across all of the manual processes in the state and look for ways to automate those practices for efficiencies and cost savings. You fill out this intake form on the ADS website. It comes to a group on my team that then meets with members of the business that submitted it. So in your case, it would be you come to this meeting, along with members of our field and core team, the project management office, and Justin Kenny from the Chief Performance Office. And what we do is we look at that idea, we gather more information to understand what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve, what is the need that you have. There's can be a little bit of procedure around that. We have business architects that will come in and do capability modeling and look at your current state processes and help develop kind of like what future state processes could look like. And then what happens is we develop what we call a business case. And in that document, we determine where does this go from here? Is it an internal project that we within ADS could do with the current tools that we have today? Or is it a project that's going to require a procurement, bring in a vendor? And depending on that decision point, it will determine if it goes to the PMO to become an active project and whether or not it stays within the IT shop, operation shop for ADS. And that comes with a whole cost workbook and all of the information that you would normally see in the current IT ABC form is now in all of these new things. We're finding that this is a great advancement for the state. We have seen 60 new initiatives come in as of today. And the business partners are finding a lot of value in it because it's helping them get a better handle on how much funding they need to support their activities and how much resource capacity they need, as well as how much we're going to need, right? So we're finding better informed projects at the start, which I think is setting us up for a much more successful project experience. And the other thing that we're really focusing on are those business outcomes. What are the things that we want to achieve and how are we going to measure success against them? So what you just described is something that could come in through that intake process and probably lead to a decision that would hopefully inform what do we need for funding, what do we need for resources, and what is our approach to make that happen?
Secretary Riley Hughes, if you don't mind, I would expand upon that. So intake is one step in the life cycle process. And through intake, we've been able to actually identify a lot of those manual processes. One example of that is the fingerprint background check. We're going to be digitizing the fingerprint background check that is used across the state for every organization, not just state government. And it's manual right now. It's on paper right now. And so it captures that and starts documenting it. So when we come in and say it's not an IT project, right? There is no IT today, but it's a project that is going to have IT oversight, and we're going to digitize. But you're honing in on something that's really important, which is a lot of these processes are not documented. Right. You know, we can identify the expense of the manual efforts. Throwing more bodies at a problem doesn't fix the problem. And so to better inform and better make projects more effective, this step in the process, which is a full life cycle of the process, is going to be critical to them.
Great, thank
You're
you.
here already.
Yes.
Sorry.
And I'm sorry if we're the cause of your losing your voice. I can imagine you needed to go find a room and scream after me. And sorry if that's the case.
Was your hand up, Victoria?
It just went, so I don't know what it is.
I did have time.
I know. Okay, great. Rep Campbell.
I think Rep Bailey was.
Oh, Rep Bailey. The chopstick
Yeah.
wasn't being properly employed.
Okay, so to Rep Sebelia's thing there, that is bothering me about not getting reports. Not that I want you to do more reports, but stuff with the top secret stuff in it.
Mhm.
But that can be generalized somehow. It just seems like not everybody's getting the information they should be getting. And that's one. The next one is the one about the Medicaid match system. I don't know which one that is in here. Is that one, how's that one progressing?
The data warehouse project, that is.
Well, the one where I've been told that we're not getting all the federal match we should be getting for Medicaid because the system's not working.
OCC list. Oh,
Uh,
so that one is in procurement. They're about to select a vendor. They haven't made their final decision yet. So that's where that currently stands.
Okay,
As far as
and does that,
that is.
would that not be a priority project to get moving on?
It is a priority project. It's got a lot of leadership oversight. We're meeting, I think, weekly with AHS leadership, working through the vendor selection process to make sure that we get them a solution that they can use.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last one I have is if the person using the system or is trying to get people to do everything electronically, and there's a problem with some of this input stuff, like I tried to do one with the FR and I get the whole form done and it wanted the zip code. And I tried to put the zip code in, then it wanted my 9-digit zip code and it wouldn't take it. So in the meantime, nobody answers the phone. So meanwhile, I have to write an email to DFR and say, I can't get this zip code in here. And I get a response back saying, oh, that's a little tricky. And I go, okay, so,
Jeez.
and I go, well, all right, why haven't you sent that to either you folks to get it fixed or whoever,
Great
whoever
question.
system it is. And then in the meantime, fortunately, I printed it out, which we're trying to avoid doing. And I said, well, now you tell me what I gotta do to try to make the zip code work. Well, then your form timed out. And I said, so who gets that information to try to get this thing fixed?
Well, so that is a great question. I'm not as familiar with DFR as you are.
Well, they
But-
said it was an outside vendor.
Well, that is, so their current legacy system is likely being maintained by a vendor.
Oh, that's a legacy system.
The current system is, yes, it's not a new thing.
Okay.
I do believe have an IT modernization project, but I don't know where that is in the process. If it's in the pipeline still or in the intake process still or not, I'd have to go and look. But yeah, I think you have to work with DFR, who would need to work with their vendor. I'm not sure.
But that's
Beyond that.
taxpayer supposed to, hourly person trying to use the soap. I mean, that should be, if it's not working and they know it's not working, why aren't they saying you need to fix this?
I mean, I can reach out to my IT partners and see if anybody's aware of any issues. That is way outside my purview
Okay.
in the project space.
I'm
So
just trying to find out how we deal with this stuff, because I'm sure a lot of other people.
every system is different, right? Like, so for example, DMV, they, I believe, have a help desk that supports the users when they're having problems interacting with that system, right? And that help desk.
Important thing to standardize.
Right, and that, well, and yes, and it should be. I think it is, but I can't say that across the board with confidence. Let me just say that. But that help desk, if somebody is trying to use the DMV system and they're running into issues, that is staffed by DMV staff to start. Like, there's usually tiers of support. So there's like a tier 1 support, that's on the business side. They come in, the business tries to resolve the issue. If they can't, they bump it up to tier 2 support. That's when they bring in their ADS partner or their vendor ADS partner to look at it, because then maybe the ADS IT manager can resolve it. If you can't resolve it in tier 2, then it usually goes up to tier 3, and that's where you bring in the vendor itself to resolve it. So that's the like standard process that I've seen across multiple projects, but I don't know if that's true with every system in state government today. I'd have to, that would be something that we'd have to look into. Excuse me.
Victoria?
Oh, okay. My question is back to the background checks. I thought I saw on the dashboard when I looked at it yesterday that project is nicely proceeded.
It
Is
is.
that the one you referred to?
Mhm.
Digitization. So the backlogs we're hearing about, the reprieve is coming.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's in an RFP process currently. So depending on the outcome of that and who they select for the vendor will determine kind of what the next thing looks like and what the timeline looks like. But as of right now, they're on track.
We have some outside pressures too. CDD, no funds. They have to be expended by the end of the year. Okay, so you're going to see some more.
Oh, good to
Yeah.
good to hear. And then my other quick question was, this sounds great with your new intake process. Do you know whether the other branches are also doing similar things like judicial and
As
legislative?
far as intake goes,
Yeah.
not that I'm aware of, but we've heard some really great feedback from like the Agency of Natural Resources that's used our process and said that it's been refreshing. I would say is the most recent comment I had. Their COO was, well, she was also part of building it, but
That's great.
yeah. So hopefully she would be happy with what she tells you.
Rep. Putner's question about manual processes just reminded me about what he said earlier about how you're going to be tracking progress and expenditures. And it sounds like the change in the coming year's budget is going to increase your manual processes.
It is, and it's going to slow us down.
Is there any help for that?
I don't know. I think it's too early to tell. I would say that we have been working very closely with finance and management to try to develop a process that will work for everyone. It's the unknowns across the different agencies and their business offices. I don't have enough knowledge of their processes and procedures to be able to tell you what that looks like. But typically what I've seen in the past is that there's usually a delay between when they pay for something and when ADS bills them for something, right? So that we're just gonna have to wait and see. And I do think as long as we maintain that collaborative spirit that I've seen so far, we'll be able to work through challenges. But I just want to say that I don't think you're gonna see weekly cost data updated. It's not gonna be achievable on a weekly basis. There's gonna be delays in obtaining that data.
Okay, well, who was next? Oh, Brett Marl.
Yeah, I have an IT question, which isn't really an IT question, which is how you guys determine really how much and when to do the testing before you go live. We heard on Tuesday with the ERP project, like the new configuration will allow for substantially more testing before you go live, right? Where I'm getting at is like, I'm interested in building confidence with the Vermonters and the state workforce in our IT capabilities and general and your department and just functionality, right? So if something goes out like BT buys, which people get immediately frustrated with and it gets bad press, you have both the public and your customers who are the people working in state government get frustrated. So I'm interested in the process right before that. Like how realistic is it to, I mean, it would probably differ from project to project, but
Yeah.
That testing phase seems pretty crucial in terms of going live
Yep.
at no amount of testing is going to resolve everything. Obviously, once you go live, there are always going to be issues, but there's a degree there where a degree of confidence that would, you get my question.
I do.
Yeah.
And so this is testing, user acceptance testing in particular is, I would say, one of the most critical phases of a project. It is always usually the first one to get shrinked as far as the amount of time allotted because of things that happen upstream of the project. Oftentimes, this is a people comment, right? People don't like the narrative that comes out when a schedule gets extended, right? When we extend the schedule to make more time available for user acceptance testing, that is often received as a negative because you've needed more time to do something. I would flip that from my professional experience. Extending your schedule to allow for more time for testing is the right thing to do for that exact reason. Regardless of whether or not it's going to cost more, it is the right thing to do because the lost opportunity you have by not doing thorough, robust testing is exactly what happens, right? You put a system into production that's got problems, flaws, defects, whatever, wasn't fully tested. Things didn't get uncovered in testing, right? And then the experience on the end user is not great. And trust me, I feel the pain of that VT buy system myself at times because I'm doing a lot of approvals in it right now that, are because of a defect that hasn't been fixed yet. It's coming, but it's not there yet, right? So it is critical that we have enough time for user acceptance testing. As project managers, we have time baked into schedules to allow for that, but we often get overruled when other things happen in a project that requires that we shrink that timeline to hit that end date. Sometimes, like I said, that end date is driven by a funding requirement that says if you don't have this done by this date, you're going to lose your funding, or a compliance requirement that says this must be in place by this date. So sometimes those are the drivers that will shrink user acceptance testing. The other thing I would say too is the state of Vermont really needs to invest in quality assurance and quality management. And what I mean by that isn't tools, it is training. It is preparing the state workforce to be good testers. So, for example, UI modernization is in testing currently, right? They have a state workforce that also does operations work for VDOL, for UI processing, claims processing, right? So you are now asking somebody to come in and spend 8 hours a day doing user acceptance testing while also processing their UI claims and operations, right? That person knows how to process claims probably better than I could ever even interpret what a claim looks like or how to put that data into their system. But when I'm asking them to test for a field and how it's supposed to respond, they don't necessarily know how to do that. So we need to invest training up front. And I guess that means we have to leave.
Please, may I have your attention, please? The building evacuation, gather your belongings if they are within reach, and evacuate the building using the designated route to the closest stairwell exit.
Out the door to the left.
Designated area.
At the
Check
door to the
in
left.
your fire and life safety for